Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Surviving Out of Spite. My name is Samantha Sauer, and I'm your host. In today's episode, I got to talk to Samantha Cook about her 15-year journey with gastroparesis and the lessons that she's learned along the way. She's a patient and a psychologist, so she offers a very unique perspective on the importance of mindset, emotional processing, and self-care when navigating chronic illness. You'll hear how she reflects on the role of community support, evolving medical care, and the impact of illness on identity. Her story is one of resilience, growth, and finding fulfillment despite the challenges of having gastroparesis, all while reminding us that life with chronic illness is not just about survival, but about creating space for joy, connection, and meaning. Stay tuned. Well, thank you, Samantha, so much for being here with me today. For the audience members that are watching that don't know you, I want to give them a little bit of a chance to get to know who you are and what part of your story, brought you to the gastroparesis world.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. So I'm Samantha. I'm from Australia. I have been dealing with gastroparesis for the past 15 years. I'm also a psychologist. I've been a psychologist for over 27 years, I think. Um, I'm married and I have two children as well, and my son has a neurological condition, so that just adds another complication into the mix. Um, I still struggle with gastroparesis symptoms on a daily basis, but I guess for the first 9 years of my journey, I felt more like I was existing rather than living. And I then in 2019 did some coaching sessions with Crystal Satrelli, and that's where our relationship started. And from that point on, I felt more like I was living rather than existing. Now, that doesn't mean my gastroparesis symptoms got better, but just my thoughts associated around gastroparesis, I was aware of how they were creating my experiences for me, and just having that awareness has just changed my daily interaction. And so now I provide coaching to other people with gastroparesis and other people with other chronic health conditions. Crystal and I do the Living Well podcast, and I've also set up my own Thriving with Gastroparesis community, and I run some free webinars as well. So I guess that's just me in a nutshell.
That's amazing. I know we were able to speak with Crystal a couple times earlier this year, and she lovingly brought us together, which I'm so glad that she always happy for her fellow Samantha, even though it's a common name, but every once in a while I'm like, hey, you two, what do we have in common besides our name? So apparently that's gastroparesis. So
yes.
We've got two for two. But it's so interesting to talk to other people and just hear their experiences. And we've spoken before this, so I've gotten to know you a little bit of your story as well, and just that mindset around illness and around having gastroparesis, and talking with different people who are in different parts of their journey, and really just trying to kind of learn or relearn how to live with the disease, and how the disease wants to live with you, and who's going to be driving the car, who's in charge today, and how are we going to feel about if you are not the one in charge today. It's been so interesting to learn from other people at different parts of their journeys, and just really, it's helped me a lot kind of sit back and be like, I never thought of it that way. It's been really eye-opening for me, which has been really great. And with your psychology background, it must have been very different for you trying to navigate these feelings. I know for myself, when I am not doing something as well as I feel like I should be doing it, I'm like, I should know better than this by now. I should have learned this. And I just wonder or what you experience when you're trying to learn this new normal, some of the kind of trauma, anxiety, and the changes that come with it, and navigating that with what or help teach other people about how to live with these same things. Do you say, put you on the spot, say, do you practice what you preach? You know, or what did you learn so you could practice what you preach?
I guess for the first 9 years, no, I was not practicing what I preached because I was in doing mode. So all those
Hmm.
emotions, no, I don't like processing emotions. So they were all just pushed to the side and it was just
Hmm.
doing mode. And then when when I started working with Crystal and my viewpoint just broadened, then I started experiencing emotions, which was incredibly uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
so therapeutic at the same time.
Hmm.
And I feel like I rebuilt myself.
It's
So,
amazing.
since for the past 6 years, I absolutely practice what I preach. And so, all of the resources that I give to the people in my community, I utilize them and I've tried them and I've tweaked them. So it's not just,
Hmm.
something that I've come across in my psychology training. It's something that I personally use and that I find useful. Now, that's not to say that, it's a one size fits all approach and that
Sure.
one thing works for everybody, but it provides a starting point, and then from
Hmm.
there it's then tweaked to the individual. But yes, I practice everything that I preach. I'm not perfect with it
Hmm.
because like you, I strive for perfection, which is not good at times. And so
Yeah.
when I know I really should be resting, I don't often listen to myself.
Oh,
I don't
yeah. Don't
listen
call
to my
me out on
body and what
that.
my body tells me. Um,
Yeah.
And in terms of saying no, I am being diagnosed with gastroparesis has taught me that I need to say no. I'm still not the best at it. I'm a lot better than I was. And in terms of prioritizing myself, that is still really tricky. So it's a
Yeah.
work in progress for me.
Yeah, and I think just as a person to talk to, right? To hear you say like, yes, I've learned all of these things and I've improved on these things and this is something that worked for me and I want to share, but also like I'm not perfect at this. I don't have it down pat 100% every day. And I think that especially in the, digital space and you've got a lot of people sharing their stories on, social media, whether they're someone sharing their chronic illness story or just their life story, we can get wrapped up in what we think somebody's life is like or what
Hmm.
we are just assuming their life is like based on what they're sharing. So for someone to say like I don't have it all together all the time, even though I'm learning and I have done these things that work really well, I think we need more of that, right? Like more of those real conversations to say
Yes.
like, hey, I stumbled today, I do know better, but I also am aware enough to know that like these stumbles are still going to happen, but I've learned the tools to manage around that, whether it's a mental stumble around something that you're dealing with or a physical stumble, right? Of
Mhm.
a maybe you ate something you shouldn't have because it just looked really good and you couldn't say no and then you have to pay for it the next day. We've learned a little bit how to deal with those things, which is just really refreshing to hear that from somebody to say, like, I don't have it all together.
And I think it's hard as well because we're not just dealing with our illness in isolation,
Hmm.
where we still have other roles in life. So, whether you're a wife or a husband to someone, or whether you're a mother or a father, or you have elderly parents, or you're working. So, we're juggling our illness in the midst of all of those things. And so, and we feel those responsibilities too. So, even though we know what's best for us on one day might be to rest, but
Hmm.
well, particularly for me as a mum to my son who has high needs, that's not always possible. And
Yeah.
so it's trying to balance it as best that you can. And mine is far from perfect. But each day we can only do what feels right and what's best for us in any given moment. And learning not to beat ourselves up over that.
Yeah. I think one of the things that has helped me over the years is to really like not expect the same thing every day, even if it's
Mhm.
like my output, because you know just as well as I do, and anybody else who has any form of chronic disease, that what you do on Monday doesn't mean you can do the same thing on Tuesday, or Wednesday, or, trying to save your spoons, right? Or decide
Mhm.
where you're going to use those. And I think trying to pull back on that expectation of perfection and think that, like, really one of the hardest things for me was realizing, I can't do everything. I can't do things just because in my head I want to do them, or I tell myself I can do it, doesn't actually mean I can do it. And that was a really hard pill to swallow, because I never wanted anyone to tell me that I couldn't do something. Like, "Oh, you said I couldn't do that. Let me go prove you wrong." And sometimes
Yes.
trying to prove somebody wrong actually was detrimental. So it's like a weird balance of, well, I can't do it this way. Is there another way that I can make this work? And I
Yes.
realized that that adaptation, or that I'm doing it, it just looks differently than how I envisioned, really helped me stop beating myself up so much when I couldn't do something the way that I anticipated or the way that I hoped to do. And I still deal with that. There are days that I go try to do something and it's so much harder than I anticipated. So I'm like, well, I tried. I gave it what I had today to give it. So I'm going to have to just stop and say, what can I do tomorrow to either make this possible, or do I want to just scrap it all together and retry another day?
And it's being creative as to how you can do things differently. Um,
Oh, absolutely.
because, touching back on my son again with his neurological condition, it's, we've always said to him, we've never said to him, you can't do something. We just need to do it
Mhm.
differently. And you
Yeah.
might need help doing it. So you can still achieve certain things. It's just doing them in a different way. And
Hmm.
it's just opening up our thinking and broadening our thinking to, there's other possibilities, and there's other ways. There's not just one way to do something, just like there isn't a one size fits all approach to gastroparesis.
Yeah, or it might take you longer to do something.
Yes.
I know for me, just like career wise, because I got sick basically right out of college. So my hopes and dreams of what I wanted to do after college kind of just disappeared. And
Mm.
that was really tough, having to like grieve the dream that I had for myself. I had to kind of step back and say, like, well, that's just not possible anymore. That's a different world. That was a different life. It's just not here. So what can I do? And it took me a few years to get to a good place of, that was another life. That was cool. That was great. That's not the life that I can have anymore. And I'm okay with that. I can actually say that now. I couldn't say that in the beginning because I was absolutely not okay with that. I was pissed off all the time. And
Absolutely.
trying to kind of find who I was amongst this illness. And I know we had talked about this a little bit too, with who am I within this illness, right? Like, it becomes such a part of us that you can't really deny it as part of our identity. But sometimes if it overtakes your identity, you kind of lose who, like, the core parts of you that make you who
Yes.
you are. And I think depending on where you fall, the support that you have, what content you might be consuming or not consuming, can really kind of shift you in one way or the other. That could really be unhealthy.
Oh, absolutely. And you saying that, um, you realized at that point in your life that, you can't do that and life is different. Maybe you can't do that at the moment, but who knows, at some point in the future, you might be able to go back down that path. But to go back to the identity, it's so true, because I know that when I was diagnosed, the diagnosis is all consuming. And I think
Uh-huh.
because there there's more known about gastroparesis now, but there still really isn't a lot known about it.
Not
And
enough.
so when I was diagnosed, it was, my gastroenterologist said to me, look, we really don't understand what happens once food enters the mouth in terms of the whole digestion process. So he said, because we don't really know, you're not going to have a clue. So essentially, just eat 6 to 10 small meals a day, low fat, low fiber, and sent me on my way. And I'm a control person. I like to be in control. And so
Yeah,
then for
who
him to
doesn't?
say that, and my dietitian to say you can eat the same thing for 5 days and have 5 completely different days, well, that just didn't work for me. So for me, for a long time, those first 9 years, it was me fighting against the gastroparesis. It's like, I'm not going to let it win. So I just kept pushing and pushing myself, and, everything just fell to the side. And then it was, you know what? Gastroparesis is part of me. But rather than it being like in the forefront and domineering everything, it kind of moved to the background in terms of identity, because
Hmm.
I'm still Samantha, I'm still a wife, I'm still a mother, I'm still a psychologist, I'm still a daughter. So all of those things kind of came to the surface because the gastroparesis wasn't pushing everything down as much. And I still deal with it on a daily basis. Plus now,
Hmm.
gastroparesis is other diagnosis friends that come along too and
Hmm.
join the party. But I I've regained more of my sense of self, because for me it was like it was a battle. It was, one versus the other. Whereas now it's like, yep, we're living together. Gastroparesis is part of me.
Hmm.
I can still do things that I wanted to do, maybe not to the same extent, completely differently than I'd initially envisaged, but there's still possibilities in life for me, and I can live rather than feel like I'm existing.
Yeah. I love that because I think I still go through some periods of that, but I definitely went through when I first got diagnosed and the like I grew up with the internet and like the growth of like social media and everything. So when I first got diagnosed and like you type it into like Google or Facebook and it's like, "Oh, here's a Facebook group." That's actually how I found G-PACT way back in the beginning of my diagnosis, which I'm grateful for, obviously, because it brought me, to this space in my life right now. But at that point, I'm like, it was all consuming because, like you said,
Mhm.
when you get this diagnosis, you walked in one person and you walked out a completely different person, and you had like no choice in what just happened. It was kind of just like you walked in, they smacked you in the face, and then you turned around and left. And like, taking time to process that, I think for me at least, joining Facebook groups, like talking about my illness all the time, like really kind of trying to, in my head, I was like bringing awareness to it. And it was like, I want to talk about this because it changed my life and it was so consuming. I had nothing else to talk about. Like you were saying, you're still a wife, you're still a mother, you're still a daughter, you're a friend, you're a
Mhm.
psychologist. You have all of these other pieces of you that are no less of pieces just because of this diagnosis. But
Yes.
I think, in at least from my experience, and it sounds like yours a little bit as well, when you get that diagnosis, like you don't really get anything else, right? Like
No.
there's
No.
such little support that like you don't know how to not let it consume you because you don't know what to do with it. And
Yes.
I got to a point where like I don't share my story very much outside of like the G-PACT gastroparesis world, like my personal social media pages, like a little bit here and there. Maybe I share G-PACT stuff, but like my personal health life, I don't really share it anymore because to me, just like you, that's not at the forefront anymore. I'm like, it's still here. I deal with it, but like, no one needs to hear that I vomited today. Nobody
Yeah.
needs to know that like I'm dealing with something unless it's like this really big thing that is going to affect other people. And that's the quickest way for me to let a mass amount of people know, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it because I don't want you to look at me like I'm sick. You can know that, but again, that's in the background. I just want you to look at
Yes.
me for a person, and this is part of my identity, but it's not my entire identity. Still working
Yes.
through that, but it's because you want people to like acknowledge it, but also like not acknowledge it too much, but
Yes.
then not they acknowledge it. It's a weird dynamic
Yes.
to live in.
It is. It is. Yeah. Because if I think there's the assumption that if you're working and you're doing these things and people see you out and about, well, you must be okay. And it's like, no,
Hmm.
I still struggle every day. Like, yeah, I might have vomited before I left home, but
Hmm.
I don't let that dominate what I'm doing. Yes, it I'm going to say determines, it contributes to my decision making, absolutely,
Sure. Yeah.
but it I I can still do things in spite of, my diagnosis.
hmm I know a few years ago, like I love to run. I've run multiple half marathons and I'm trying to get back into that right now. And as I start running again, I'm like, how the hell did I ever do this for 13 miles? Like when
Mm,
I'm only doing like one right now. And there were times back in the real thick of illness for me where I was battling a lot of nutritional issues. I was tube fed on TPN, and people would see me out running and they'd be like, same thing, assume that you're okay. And now that I'm older, I've got some more experience and I can step away from that. I can understand why people think that or why they assumed that, because I would assume that too. And I'm a person
mm,
who understands invisible illnesses and disabilities that are not so visible. I would assume, like, okay, you had a good day. But kind of like what you said, for me, I was puking over the guardrails a little while ago because like something didn't sit right. So I had to stop, puke over the guardrails, rallied, and kept going until I got home. But what they didn't see were the recovery periods or the
mhm,
pain that I went through, because that didn't need to be talked about. It was just something that I dealt with. And, if that is something you choose to talk about, like, and that works for you and that's helpful for you, and again, wherever you are in your journey, that's great. It's just like, it sounds like for you and for me, where we are in our lives, it's like, I've had enough. Like, get in the back seat. Like, you are
yeah,
not in charge here. I am in charge here. Some days it likes to creep in the front. Sometimes it does like to remind me that it's still there,
mm,
but I like to focus or try to focus on the things I can control. And that is all those other pieces of who I am as a person.
yes, definitely.
It's very, like I said, it's very interesting to see where other people have these, like, I don't want to call them a break per se, but like where you realize that there's so much more to your diagnosis and to living with your diagnosis. And I know we call this surviving out of spite. And I think, for me, that mentality sometimes is like, I'm going to do this in spite of you. I'm going to do
Mm,
this like you're not in charge. I'm going to do this because I have you and I'm going to prove that I can still do whatever I want. And
yes.
sometimes that mentality has gotten me to be able to do some really amazing things. And sometimes that mentality has got me in trouble. So I think growth comes with knowing when to lean into that and when to give myself
Yes.
some grace and lean out of that.
Absolutely. And it's knowing our limitations, and
Okay.
it's hard. And some days we push a little bit too much and then we suffer for a bit. And then other days we're okay with, okay, yep, this is what I need to do today. I don't
Yeah.
know anyone who has it perfect. I
Hmm.
think we all
Yeah.
struggle with knowing that limit. Um, and that's okay. We don't need to beat ourselves up over that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I do want to ask, like, with the people that you're coaching, how has being able to relate to people's struggles maybe helped you in helping other people? Like, how has your journey and your understanding of chronic illness, like, basically changed how you are a psychologist and working with other people? Because I know um it's hard for somebody to understand something if they've never been through it. So you have this whole other ability now. It's like this, like, psychology superpower to really understand a little bit differently that, what it looks like on the outside isn't always what it is, to an even more like larger degree than you did prior to that.
Oh, it's absolutely made me a better psychologist because I think in general our life experiences help to make us better people. So
Mhm.
I think that I know that when we're diagnosed, it's almost some people feel like they've lost who they are as a person and themselves and they'll never get that back. I honestly feel like I am a better version of me now than I was before. And I
Mm,
know there'll be lots of people and they'll be like, that is crazy. How on earth can she say that? But it's taught me that to actually stop, to be kind to myself, to not
mhm,
beat myself up over things, to put my own needs more in the forefront. I'm far from perfect with that, but to take time for me, to know that it's okay to stop, have a rest, and nourish my body. So I have learned so much more from this illness in my own journey, and also that the small things really mean so much, and
yeah,
to be more present in the moment and more engaged. And then yes, as a psychologist, having these challenges myself makes me more able to understand the people that I work with at a different level, and
mhm,
understand that, it's not just a textbook case. Okay, someone's experiencing anxiety, and so this is how we treat anxiety from a scientific standpoint. It's more understanding that person as an individual and the struggles that they have. And it's taught me as well about looking more of the role of thought, and how much that plays into creating our experiences. And so it's helped me immensely. But then I think it's also helped the people that I work with, because they've commented that, they've had therapists before, or they have a therapist at the moment, but that therapist either doesn't have a chronic illness or they don't have
mhm.
gastroparesis. So they don't understand what that feels like and the heaviness that can be associated with that, let alone the physical symptoms as well.
Yeah,
And so I think it helps my clients too, because they're like, yep, Samantha gets it. She
mhm,
understands. And that's not to say we have the same symptoms. It's not to say that we have the same struggles, but I think talking over the screen to someone who gets it helps immensely, because I know in
yeah,
my social network and family network, my sister has gastroparesis, but no one else does, and no
mm,
one else understands, and no one else gets it. And it's really comforting to talk to someone who you have that in common with.
yeah. No, it's funny that you saying that it's made you like a better person and it's given you so much. I feel the same way. You know, this might not have been the journey I would have chosen for myself.
Hmm. Hmm.
And like by no means did I dislike the person that I was like before I got sick. I don't think any less of that version of myself at all. But what it's brought me and the things like it is sure taken a lot from me. It
Hmm.
absolutely has taken a lot, but it has given me things too. And I think that it has made me a better version of myself. It brought me so much. It brought me friendships that, like you said, they're stronger because your connection is on a
Hmm.
deeper level, on a better level. And it's just so interesting to have that conversation with somebody when it's like, you have that, I have that, or you have something too, like, so I don't need to explain my whole life story for you to like for you to understand when I say like I need to reschedule, or I'm really tired today, or I'm going through something. The other person understands it. And
Yes.
those relationships, whether it's, you know, a like client to a therapist or to a coach or just, you know, friend to friend relationship, anything like that, when a person can understand it to whatever degree they have the ability to, it's different when the person is on a similar level or similar like experience as you. Because I have friends and family that try to get it and they never will. And it's, you know,
Yes.
it's no hate on them. It's not anything bad against them. It's just like you don't get it till you get it. Right. And I would never
Yeah.
wish somebody to get it. I just wish they would get it.
Yes. And it's almost like between someone else who has it, there's like this unspoken language,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we
It's,
can sit in silence, and it's not uncomfortable.
yeah. Yeah. That one, I think. Yeah, you definitely touched on something there, because it's like someone could just come over and you just kind of like, you could sit there, you could just kind of hang out. You don't feel the pressure to like host somebody if you have like a chronic illness friend come over, or that you have to present something a certain way or be this certain version of yourself, because that's
Mm,
the environment that is demanding that certain version
yes.
of you to kind of be there. With
Yeah.
these people, you can just be. You don't have to be anything other than exactly what you are in that moment. And you're accepted, loved, and cared about in that moment. And that's something, when you find those people or find, a partner that understands that,
Mm,
it's just such a relief to just
it is.
be whatever
It
version
is.
it is.
But I
I know
think
I
it's
got
also
very lucky.
sorry, I think it's important to point out as well that in those relationships, there isn't that feeling of communal suffering, and that when
Mm,
you finish the interaction with those people, you don't actually feel worse than when you entered the interaction. Because,
yeah.
we've touched on social media in this conversation. And for me, I've joined lots of different online groups, and I look at the feeling and, pay attention to that. And a lot of the time I'd leave those groups feeling worse than when I went into them, because there seems
Yep.
to be so much communal misery or competitive suffering. It's like, well, I have this symptom, so therefore I'm worse than you. And it's
Hmm.
not a supportive environment. And that's what led me to establish my community, because I wanted that space for people that, yes, you can talk about symptoms if you want to, and there's no judgment in terms of, oh, well, you're not as bad as I am. There's
Hmm.
none of that competitiveness. It's just support for one another, and feeling amongst people where you are supported, where, you're shown that you're more than just your diagnosis.
Yeah.
I think is just so healing in itself.
Yeah, I know that a lot of why I stepped away from posting, doing anything in groups as just myself, outside of G-PACT, outside of like my identity here, and just like myself, I couldn't be in that environment for all the reasons that you listed. And I
Mm,
know that there's a reason and a time and a place for all of these different things. And for some people, maybe that works for them. That environment's okay. Maybe they don't feel that it's unsupportive. But I started to realize as I got older and I got a little bit deeper in the, disease journey, that, you know, the people that were like me weren't in the groups anymore. Like they
mm,
weren't talking anymore, because I was like, where do I go? Like I don't fit in with what these people are going through. So I don't feel like I have anything to offer them except for I'm sorry and I hope tomorrow is a better day. I don't feel like I
mm,
have anything for you here. But if you want to come in here and vent about everything, like I'm not going to tell you you can't do that. That's just, I'm going to not put myself in that
yes.
environment. And I started to feel like I didn't have any place to go. And that's actually some of why we started the podcast, because we felt like we wanted to try to bring a different side of content, a different environment, different conversations with really cool people and experts, and just different stories. So that way they're trying to form that environment that felt like you were getting something out of it, or maybe you were learning something from it. Maybe it was a little bit of tough love out of it, that maybe you needed to hear somebody to tell you, like, you can go do that. Like it's just, or even sometimes someone just to tell you to deal with your shit,
Yes.
because sometimes
Yep.
you do need a little bit of
Yep.
that, but in a way that is still out of love and support,
Yes.
and not that unsupportive type of environment. So I I feel like we've begun to create that here, and I feel that more with everybody that I've talked to. And it is hard, because can become what you consume. And if you are
Yes.
consuming things that are not giving to you but maybe taking from you,
Mhm.
and you're feeling all that negativity all the time, that's one of those things to kind of check what you're consuming and what's
Yes.
around you, because if it's not a healing environment, we're not going to do ourselves any favors to be in there. We all want to heal, can't make it go away, but at least we can put ourselves in a better environment for
Yes.
our mental state, which also affects our physical state, which affects our
Hmm.
mental state. And you get in that
Yes.
cycle. So you want to be in a good environment.
Good.
So so since, you were in Australia and in the US and in different place, even in different states, depending on the level of expertise of the doctor will, vary the care that you get with dealing with gastroparesis. Can you talk a little bit about what you've been able to do that's been helpful, or some of the treatments that you found helpful to get you to where you are now that are outside of all of the mental work that you've been doing?
Um, so certainly there are more medications available in Australia for gastroparesis than
Mm,
there are in the States. Um, and they have been really helpful for me. And so, for example, in the States, I think it's only been maybe in the last 2 years. I think it's called Motegrity and
hmm.
Trulance. So we call
Yes.
it Prucalopride over here. I know that's
Hmm.
only become available maybe in the last couple of years, whereas I've been on it for now 12 years in Australia.
Wow.
And that has made a difference for me because my gastroparesis isn't isolated to my stomach. Mine's my whole
Hmm.
digestive tract. So my bowels are very impacted as well. So
Hmm.
that has absolutely helped me, that medication.
Wow.
Um, in terms of, I think another one, I've had Botox into my pylorus, and
Hmm.
I had that quite early on, maybe within the first 5 years
Okay.
of my diagnosis, whereas it's another one that seems a little bit more recent in the States.
Hmm.
Um, but in terms of my treatments, yes, the Botox helped me early on. I had 3 rounds of it. The first two worked, the last one didn't.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not sure if you have this treatment in the States, whether you do like nerve blocks into the stomach.
Not that I'm aware of,
So
but
I had
okay.
that before COVID,
Okay.
and found again that the first two helped and the third one didn't.
Hmm.
Um, I had the neurogastric stimulator implanted. That was back in 2013, and found that that helped for 12 months, and then it stopped working for me and created other issues, but that was just with me. Um, I've had a number of feeding tubes in the past, and they have absolutely helped. They
Mm.
haven't been pleasant, but
Hmm.
they've helped in terms of weight and lack of nutrition. And my most recent one was, I think, 2 to 3 years ago now.
Okay. Okay. Did you feel like in terms of getting treatment, or having the conversation with your doctor of like what's next? Like, this didn't work, so what's next? Did you ever feel like you weren't getting what you needed from the doctor, or you had to really fight for treatment because they weren't listening to you as much? Especially if we go back when there was less information on gastroparesis and how to treat it, minus the lack of research. But did you ever feel like doctors were gaslighting you on what you were dealing with, especially given that research was so little and you're talking about all of your symptoms and what's needed? I know for myself, sometimes, depending on the doctor I was seeing, it's like I had to fight for something or prove that like this was actually going on. Did you ever experience anything like that in all your years of treatment?
Um, Probably early on, because to gain access to one of the medications, you had to go through an approval process, and it had to go through um, a different state in Australia. And so essentially there was lots of paperwork to have it approved
Sure.
because there was
Sure.
concern with some side effects with it. And
Hmm.
so it was more pushing that I'm at this point, we need something, where is that up to? And just following up where that process was up to. But with
Hmm.
that particular gastroenterologist, I didn't feel like he was responsive to what my needs were. And when I was saying, this is how I'm feeling, I didn't feel like he quite got that. So that then led
Gotcha.
to me changing specialists. And I'm still with that current gastroenterologist now, the one that I changed to. And we got to
Hmm.
a point and he said, look, I really don't know what else I can do. So he found more of a specialist, I guess, a motility specialist for me to go to. And so I would still say him, but I saw the motility specialist and they worked together well. But I I definitely feel like from the conversations I've had with clients in the States that we are so fortunate here in Australia with our health system compared to the States. And I, with my specialists, I haven't gotten to the point that I felt like I needed to prove how unwell I was or fight for anything. Over the years, though, I've narrowed my treatment team down. But in
Hmm.
terms of my gastroenterology input, um, I'm incredibly happy with where I'm at. And my gastroenterologist, I've seen him grow over the years in terms of, for him, it's now not just about, medical interventions or medications. It's about, mental health, and it's about all other aspects of your life. And so he's completely on board with alternative treatments and therapies as well.
That's amazing to hear.
Yeah.
I think like going back a little bit to what we were saying about your like showing that disability, right? And where it's kind of a little in the background. I think one of the places that I know I have felt, and I know others have too, is that where you need to be able to show that disability or show these things to really get the help that you know you need, but you have to portray a certain way. I think,
Yes.
with what we've gone through here, what I've gone through, and I've seen it in a lot of the groups and heard it from a lot of different people that almost pushes back on like all the work that you do to not let it define you so much that it's like the work kind of just stops when you go into the doctor's office and you have to let it define you in that office in order to get the assistance that you need. So I think, hearing that your doctor is really focusing holistically on a person, even again, going back to where you're first diagnosed, when you're diagnosed, it's like, okay, like eat, no raw vegetables, low fiber, low fat, and like chew really well and don't eat anything you shouldn't eat with no like mental health support around that or anybody to kind of help you, learn your diagnosis, learn how to live with your diagnosis. So to hear that that's changed for you with the person that you're with now and seeing that growth, the person, the next time he has a new diagnosis, I know he wasn't the original person that, diagnosed you, but that person won't feel what you felt or what I felt on the day of diagnosis because they're treating it so differently and looking at it as treating a person and not just a disease. So that's really great to hear. I
Yeah.
know I've been lucky with a couple GI doctors myself, but I still feel for myself too as I've gotten better. I had Botox myself, I think hit it 3 times, I think. But the first time worked, the second time didn't, the third time worked. And then I ended up having a G-PACT done. And I take Motegrity now myself, which that's a fantastic drug. At least
Mm-hmm.
for me, it sounds like it was for you too. Very
Yes.
grateful for, because top to bottom, mine doesn't work either. So it helps all around a little bit there. But to kind of again, you're just trying to live your life, you're trying to function, but you still have to deal with this when you go into the office. I'm like, are you going to take me seriously today? When
Yes.
I tell you I don't feel good? If my hair is done, are you going to be like, no, you probably feel okay? Am I going to be questioned here? It's like, it just kind of puts you back into, am I disabled enough to get your attention? Or am
Yes.
I not there? So I think what you've gone through and just kind of talking about that too, it really it challenges you in every single environment to really do the work. So that way,
Yes,
when you're put in that situation where you have to maybe defend your disability or wear it openly, that doesn't change when you walk out of that room and kind of pull you back on all the work you did to not feel so defined by that disability.
definitely. And I mean, for me, the experience was different when I had to go to the emergency department. And that was more, yes, you had to prove your disability. And so if you're
Yeah.
in pain and you weren't wriggling around or groaning, well, clearly you're not in as much pain. Um, and if you didn't want to take a certain pain medication they were offering, because you know that it'll help with the pain, but it makes your constipation worse. So
Yep.
we're solving one problem to create another one. They didn't understand that. So clearly you're not in as much pain. Um,
Hmm.
so now because I have such a great team and because I have the meds at home if I need them, I don't need to do those emergency presentations, which is really helpful. Um, if I absolutely had to, yes, I would.
Yeah.
Um, but I have the means at home to manage the flares that I have,
Hmm.
which helps because yeah, it doesn't feel nice when you're getting questioned about the severity of your symptoms because um you're not behaving in the certain way that they think you should behave.
Hmm. That's ERs here too.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that sounds like an emergency department situation, which it would be great if that would change, where you didn't feel like you had to go in and be like, do you want my, 10-foot tall book of medical records to show you, or
Hmm.
do I need to do X, Y, or Z just to get assistance here? So unfortunately, we're very similar in that regard to medical care. That's not the place I would want us to be similar
No,
on. But well, thank you for talking with me today. In the same way with Crystal, like when I sit down and talked with her, I kind of like got off the call and I just was like, I feel like I just had therapy. And in a way, I feel like I had that with you too, because it it's like those things that kind of like stick with you when someone says something and it's like you kind of walk away from it and then all of a sudden you're like, huh, that really made a lot of sense. And then it stays with you and it
yeah,
really like it changes. It's a small little thing that changes like a perception or how you handle something or how you think about something. So thank you for being
that's all
that
right.
person because it can tell that it really has, obviously I didn't know you pre-diagnosis, but I can tell just from how you explain yourself, talk about, the disease and all of these things that you've got to be changing many, many lives for all the people that you talk with and the groups that you run. So on behalf of them, I thank you and thank you for everything that I've gotten from our conversation and our previous conversation. So, and thank you for being here. I hope everybody else who listens to this takes away as much as I did from chatting with you today.
Thank you so much, and thank you. I really appreciate you having me on.